Remember when your neighbor suddenly decides to build a massive fence, and also charge you for looking over it? That's a bit like what Canada experienced with the Trump administration. The United States, Canada's biggest trading partner, suddenly wasn't playing by the old rules. President Trump, in his infinite wisdom, decided a global 10% baseline tariff was the way to go. His aim? To shrink the US trade deficit. The result? A lot of confused and rather miffed trading partners, especially those sharing the world's longest undefended border. Canada found itself right in the crosshairs, no maple syrup shield strong enough. This wasn't just a minor tiff over who makes better bacon. These tariffs hit hard. We're talking about steel, aluminum, and a whole host of other goods. Suddenly, Canadian businesses that had relied on smooth trade flows with the US for decades were facing uncertainty. It was like being in a long-term relationship and your partner suddenly changes all the passwords. The economic shockwaves were felt across various sectors. This move forced Canada to really think, and think hard, about its reliance on its southern neighbor. It was a proper wake-up call, probably delivered by a very loud, very early alarm clock. The unpredictability became the new normal. One day things were one way, the next a tweet could change everything. This created a climate of instability that businesses absolutely loathe. Imagine trying to plan your company's future when the trade rules could flip quicker than a pancake on Shrove Tuesday. The US administration's approach was, shall we say, unconventional. It wasn't just about the tariffs themselves but the constant threat of more. This led to a serious reevaluation in Ottawa. Maybe putting all your trade eggs in one American basket wasn't the best recipe for success after all. So Canada started looking around. If your main squeeze is acting erratically, it's only natural to see who else is out there, right? This wasn't about abandoning an old friend entirely, it was more about realizing that diversification is key to survival, especially in the wild world of international trade. The tariff turmoil acted as an unexpected catalyst. It pushed Canada to explore other avenues to strengthen ties with other global players. And one of those key players looking increasingly attractive across the Atlantic was the European Union. A new chapter was dawning, prompted by a rather dramatic plot twist from south of the border. Enter CETA, or the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. It sounds a bit like a new type of robot, but it's actually a massive trade deal between Canada and the European Union. Think of it as a very detailed handshake, promising to make it easier for both sides to buy and sell stuff to each other. This agreement had been in the works for years, long before the tariff tantrums. But with the US market suddenly feeling a bit like a minefield, CETA's importance skyrocketed. It was provisionally applied back in September 2017, meaning many of its benefits kicked in even before every single country in the EU gave it the final thumbs up. This deal is a big deal. The European Union is Canada's second-largest trading partner, which is quite something when you think about the vast Atlantic Ocean separating them. In 2023, the total bilateral trade in goods and services between Canada and the EU soared past an impressive $180 billion. That's a lot of Canadian mining products, pharmaceuticals, and agricultural goodies heading east, and a lot of German cars and fancy French cheese making their way west. CETA aims to boost these numbers even further by cutting tariffs, reducing red tape, and making it easier for businesses to operate across borders. The provisional application of CETA was like a soft launch for a blockbuster movie. It allowed businesses to start reaping the benefits, testing the waters, and seeing what this new relationship could really offer. For Canada, it represented a significant step towards diversifying its trade portfolio. It wasn't just about finding new markets, it was about finding stable, predictable markets governed by clear rules. After the roller coaster ride with US trade policy, the EU's more structured approach probably felt like a calm harbor after a particularly nasty storm. The early signs were positive, with trade figures showing a healthy uptick. Of course, no trade deal is a magic wand, but CETA offered a clear pathway, a framework for deeper economic integration. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney even had a chat about its successes in March 2025. They highlighted how CETA was already delivering tangible benefits. This wasn't just about exchanging goods, it was about forging a stronger economic alliance. For Canada, looking to steady its trade ship, CETA appeared to be a very promising and increasingly vital lifeline in a changing global economic sea. It wasn't just Canada re-evaluating its dance partners on the world stage. The European Union itself was also adapting to a rapidly shifting global landscape. The world had thrown a few curveballs recently, hadn't it? We had the COVID-19 pandemic, which completely upended supply chains and made everyone realize how interconnected and vulnerable we all are. Then there's China's increasingly assertive trade posture, making waves and causing ripples across the globe. And of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a stark reminder of geopolitical instability and its profound economic consequences. These weren't minor footnotes, they were game changers. In response to these seismic shifts, the EU unveiled its updated trade strategy in 2021. They called it Open Strategic Autonomy. Now that sounds very grand, doesn't it? Essentially, it means the EU wants to remain open to global trade and investment, because that's good for business. But, and this is a big but, it also wants to be more assertive in defending its own interests and values. It's like saying, our door is open, but don't try to wipe your muddy boots on our nice new carpet, and please respect our house rules. This approach emphasizes openness, sustainability, and a willingness to stand up for itself. This new playbook wasn't just about reacting to challenges, it was about proactively shaping the future of trade. The EU realized that in a more turbulent world, it needed to be more self-reliant in critical sectors. Think medicines, raw materials, and new technologies. It also meant placing a stronger emphasis on sustainability. Trade deals couldn't just be about making money. They also had to align with environmental goals and labor standards. This marked a significant evolution in how the EU approached its trade relationships, looking for partners who shared these broader values. For countries like Canada, this new EU focus presented both opportunities and new considerations. On one hand, a more strategically autonomous EU could be a more predictable and reliable partner, especially compared to the shifting sands of US policy. On the other hand, it also meant that Brussels would be looking very closely at how its partners aligned with its own strategic priorities. This wasn't just about tariff reductions anymore. It was about building deeper, more resilient partnerships based on shared principles in an increasingly complex and, frankly, rather bonkers world. Canada needed to pay close attention to these evolving European expectations. So, CETA is this fantastic bridge across the Atlantic, right? Well, mostly. While it's been provisionally applied since 2017, meaning a lot of it is already working, there's a catch. For CETA to be fully, officially, 100% the law of the land across the entire European Union, every single one of the 27 member states needs to ratify it in their own national parliaments. Think of it like getting everyone in a massive group chat to agree on where to go for dinner. It sounds simple, but it can get complicated. Very complicated, especially when everyone has different tastes and dietary requirements. As of early 2025, the ratification process was still dragging its feet a bit. Only 17 out of the 27 EU member states had completed the full ratification. That leaves a significant chunk still needing to give it the final nod. Now you might think, it's been working since 2017, what's the big deal? The issue is that provisional application, while useful, doesn't cover every single aspect of the agreement. More importantly, until it's fully ratified by everyone, there's always a lingering uncertainty, a slight wobble in the foundations of this grand trade edifice. One of the main sticking points, or perhaps a rather large baguette in the works, has been France. The French National Assembly, their main parliamentary body, has a majority that isn't exactly CETA's biggest fan club. There are concerns there about the impact on French farmers, environmental standards, and all sorts of other things that can make politicians a bit nervous. If a major player like France ultimately decides not to ratify or keeps delaying, it poses a significant risk to the agreement's long-term stability and its full potential. It's like having one of the main support pillars looking a bit shaky. This ratification hurdle means that while Canada and the EU are enjoying many benefits of CETA, the relationship isn't quite set in stone yet. It adds a layer of complexity to the Canada-EU dynamic. Canadian businesses and policymakers have to navigate this ongoing process, hoping that the remaining countries will eventually come on board. It's a reminder that even with the best intentions and a signed deal, the internal politics of 27 different nations can create unexpected currents, a veritable riptide that can slow things down. Full steam ahead? Not quite yet, it seems. Section 5 Brussels New Rules Hurdles or Opportunities for Canada. Just when Canada was getting comfortable with the idea of a smoother trade relationship with Europe, Brussels decided to introduce some new homework. The EU, in its quest for open strategic autonomy and a greener planet, has been rolling out new regulations that could have a significant impact on its trading partners, including Canada. These aren't just minor tweaks to existing rules. Some are quite substantial. Think of it as your friend renovating their house and suddenly having a whole new set of expectations for visitors. You're still welcome, but things are a bit different now. One of these new measures is the deforestation regulation. Sounds good, right? Who doesn't want to save forests? The idea is to ensure that products sold in the EU haven't contributed to deforestation or forest degradation anywhere in the world. This means Canadian exporters of things like timber, agricultural products, or even goods that use these as ingredients will need to prove their supply chains are squeaky clean. This can be complex and costly, requiring new tracking systems and due diligence. It's a noble goal, but it adds another layer of compliance for Canadian businesses to navigate. Then there's the upcoming Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM for short. This is basically a carbon tariff. The EU wants to prevent carbon leakage, where EU companies move their polluting production to countries with laxer environmental rules, or where EU products are disadvantaged compared to imports from such countries. So, if you're exporting certain goods to the EU, like steel, cement, or fertilizers, and they were made in a place without a carbon price similar to the EU's, you might have to pay an extra levy. This is particularly spicy for Canada, especially if there are debates back home about repealing its own carbon tax. No carbon tax in Canada could mean higher CBAM costs for exporters to the EU. Ouch! These new EU measures present a mixed bag for Canada. On one hand, they reflect a growing global emphasis on sustainability, which Canada generally supports. They could even create opportunities for Canadian businesses that are already ahead of the curve on green practices. On the other hand, they are definite trade irritants. They mean more paperwork, higher potential costs, and the need to adapt quickly. Canada needs to engage proactively with the EU on these issues, ensuring that Canadian businesses understand the requirements and that the rules are applied fairly. It's about turning potential hurdles into manageable pathways, or even new avenues for green trade. Section 6, Beyond Trade Deals, the Ukraine Factor and Canada-EU Unity. While trade figures and tariff codes are all very important, sometimes global events have a funny way of reminding us what truly matters. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has cast a long shadow over international relations, and it has, rather unexpectedly, become a significant factor in strengthening the bond between Canada and the European Union. When faced with such blatant aggression and a humanitarian crisis of immense proportions, like-minded nations often find themselves drawing closer, united by shared values and a common purpose. This has certainly been the case for Canada and its European partners. Both Canadian and EU leaders have been singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to supporting Ukraine. In their discussions in March 2025, Prime Minister Mark Carney and Commission President Ursula von der Leyen didn't just talk about CETA's successes. They also strongly emphasized their joint commitment to Ukraine. This unity has been particularly noteworthy, especially as the United States, under some administrations, might appear to be exploring different diplomatic avenues, perhaps even a separate understanding with Moscow. This divergence only serves to highlight the common ground between Ottawa and Brussels. This shared stance on Ukraine goes beyond mere rhetoric. It translates into coordinated sanctions against Russia, financial aid to Kyiv, humanitarian assistance, and support for international efforts to hold Moscow accountable. When Canada and the EU act in concert on such a critical geopolitical issue, it sends a powerful message. It demonstrates a commitment to international law, to sovereignty, and to democratic principles. This kind of alignment on fundamental values can often build deeper, more resilient relationships than any trade deal alone could ever hope to achieve. It's a partnership forged not just in commerce, but in conviction. The Ukraine crisis has, in a way, provided a real-world stress test for the Canada-EU relationship. And so far, it seems to be passing with flying colors. This cooperation on a major security challenge reinforces Canada's image as a reliable and principled ally in the eyes of the EU. It demonstrates that Canada is more than just a source of raw materials or a market for European goods. It is a partner that shares fundamental geopolitical outlooks. This deeper strategic alignment could prove invaluable as both Canada and the EU navigate an increasingly turbulent and unpredictable global environment. It's a reminder that sometimes the strongest ties are those bound by shared purpose. Section 7. The EU's global charm offensive, more than just Canada. It's important to remember that Canada isn't the only country the European Union has been cozying up to. Faced with the unpredictability of traditional partners, yes, America, we're looking at you again, and the shifting tectonic plates of global power, the EU has been on a bit of a global charm offensive. It's like that person at the party who suddenly realizes they need more friends and starts mingling with everyone. This proactive trade diplomacy is all part of the EU's grand strategy to diversify its partnerships and build a network of more reliable, stable economic relationships around the world. The motivation is clear: mitigate the impact of potential US tariffs, reduce over-reliance on any single market or supplier, and foster alliances with countries that share its commitment to a rules-based international order. So, while CETA with Canada is a flagship example, it's part of a much broader pattern. For instance, the EU has been in talks to kickstart negotiations for a free trade agreement with the United Arab Emirates. The focus there is on exciting stuff like renewable energy, green hydrogen, and critical raw materials, all very much in line with the EU's strategic autonomy goals. And it doesn't stop in the Middle East. The EU is also celebrating milestones with partners further afield. For example, May 2025 marks the first anniversary of its free trade agreement with New Zealand. While New Zealand might be geographically distant, its shared values and commitment to high standards make it an attractive partner for Brussels. Each of these agreements, big or small, contributes to the EU's vision of a more diversified and resilient trade network. It's about building multiple bridges, not just one superhighway, to ensure economic security and prosperity in a complex world. This broader context is important for Canada to understand. While the focus on strengthening Canada-EU ties is crucial, Canada is one of several countries the EU is actively engaging with. This isn't a bad thing. It actually reinforces the idea that the EU is serious about building a network of stable partnerships. However, it also means Canada needs to continuously demonstrate its value and not take the relationship for granted. In this global dance of trade diplomacy, everyone is trying to put their best foot forward. The EU is clearly looking for reliable, long-term partners, and Canada has a golden opportunity to be high on that list. Section 8, Carney's Conundrum, Navigating a Protectionist World. Stepping into the role of Prime Minister in early 2025, Mark Carney inherited a complex global chessboard, with the echoes of Trump-era tariffs still reverberating and the potential for a return to more protectionist US policies. Canada finds itself in a delicate dance. One of the key challenges for the new Canadian leadership is to skillfully navigate this increasingly protectionist world. It's not just about managing the relationship with the US. It's also about ensuring that Canada remains a valued and indispensable partner to other key allies, particularly the European Union. This requires a clear vision and some deft diplomatic footwork. A significant concern on the horizon is the possibility of Donald Trump, or a similarly protectionist figure, returning to the White House. Should this happen, there's a real fear that the EU might react by adopting a more defensive Fortress Europe stance. If America starts building walls, Europe might just reinforce its own. This scenario would make it even more crucial for Canada to have strong, well-established ties with the EU. Prime Minister Carney's government needs to proactively articulate Canada's value, not just as a trading partner but as a strategic and political ally that shares Europe's core values and interests. This means more than just highlighting trade statistics. It involves showcasing the successes of CETA and demonstrating how the agreement benefits both sides. It means actively contributing to global security, as seen with the joint support for Ukraine. It also means ensuring that Canada can be a reliable partner in new areas of strategic importance for the EU, such as the supply of critical raw materials. Canada has abundant natural resources, and the EU is keen to diversify its sources for minerals essential for the green and digital transitions. The strategic partnership on raw materials is a key initiative here, and Canada needs to ensure it delivers tangible benefits for both sides. Ultimately, Mr. Carney's task is to convince Europe that Canada is not just a fair-weather friend, but a steadfast partner for the long haul. This involves consistent engagement at all levels, from political leadership to business communities and civil society. It's about building trust and demonstrating that Canada is committed to the shared project of a stable, rules-based international order. In a world where protectionist winds are blowing, Canada needs to be a beacon of reliable partnership, making itself an indispensable part of the EU's strategic calculations. It's a tough gig, but a vital one for Canada's future prosperity and security. Section 9. Canada's next chapter, Forging a Resilient Trade Future. So, where does all this leave Canada as it looks towards the future? The trade landscape has undeniably shifted. The old certainties are gone, replaced by a more complex and, at times, more confrontational environment. The tariff shocks from the Trump era served as a rather blunt instrument, forcing Canada to accelerate its efforts to diversify its economic relationships. The embrace of the European Union through CETA is a cornerstone of this strategy, but it's clear that the journey doesn't end there. Canada must continue to be agile, strategic and proactive in forging a resilient trade future for itself. Leveraging CETA to its fullest potential remains a top priority. This means not only encouraging businesses to take advantage of the existing benefits, but also working with the EU to address any implementation challenges and to ensure the agreement evolves to meet new realities. The ongoing ratification process in some EU member states needs careful diplomatic attention. Furthermore, Canada must actively engage with the EU on new regulatory initiatives like the Deforestation Regulation and CBAM, seeking to minimize burdens on Canadian exporters while upholding shared commitments to sustainability. It's about finding common ground and practical solutions. Beyond CETA, Canada needs to keep its eyes open for other opportunities to strengthen its economic security. The strategic partnership on raw materials with the EU is a prime example. By positioning itself as a reliable and sustainable supplier of critical minerals, Canada can become an even more vital partner for Europe's green and digital ambitions. This isn't just about exporting raw resources, it's about developing value-added industries and integrating Canadian businesses into global supply chains for the technologies of the future. Think batteries, clean tech, and advanced manufacturing. Ultimately, Canada's path forward involves a multi-pronged approach. It means nurturing the crucial, albeit sometimes complicated relationship with the United States. It means deepening the strategic partnership with the European Union, cementing Canada's role as a key transatlantic ally. And it means continuing to explore and build relationships with other dynamic regions around the world. The goal is to create a diverse network of trade and investment ties that can withstand global shocks and support Canada's long-term prosperity. It's about writing a new chapter where Canada is not just reacting to global events, but actively shaping its own economic destiny with confidence and foresight.